Thanks very much, John, and can I acknowledge John Cain both as former Premier and as President of the Library Board, and can I acknowledge the passion with which John has addressed his job as President of the Library Board, and I highly respect that, and I know he loves the job. Can I acknowledge, of course, Joan Kerner and Steve Bracks as former Premiers as well, and I'll come to them. Sue Hamilton, the Acting CEO and State Librarian, Bernard Salt, Hank Kramer, the National Year of Reading Ambassadors, and can I take this opportunity to acknowledge all of those, past and present, in particular our Indigenous communities, whose love of our land, whose care of our country and whose connection to this place have left us with such a treasure, something to nurture, something to aspire to and something to embrace. And I never visit the library without reflecting on the history of the library. 150th anniversary not so long ago. And to think that the library was founded at a time, indeed post-settlement, where there were barely 50,000 people living in Melbourne. But they were aspirational, they were ambitious, and they had a vision for future generations. And it's extraordinary to think of what legacy was laid down by our forebears at that time. And the library, and you've only got to spend a moment under the dome to realise how magnificent this building is, and to think of Joseph Reed, the architect, who arrived here as a young man and laid down such an extraordinary legacy in his own right, and to think of those post-settlement who joined with Indigenous communities to build our state. And predominantly, we forget that predominantly they were mostly young, and they were young at heart, and I trust this state remains young at heart and aspires and continues to aspire to future generations. And the story of Victoria is one of the great stories of this country, and we should be proud of it. And storytelling is what reading's all about, whether it's fiction, whether it's fact, whether it's something else. It's always a pleasure to be here at the library, and it's a particular pleasure to have the opportunity to be part of the Victorian launch of the National Year of Reading. And if you love website names, you've got to love lovetoread.org.au. Love to read, and for all the kids here, can I acknowledge the kids here, because they're not young at heart, but this is for them in particular. Because if you learn to read, you'll love to read. And if you love to read, you'll hear the stories, you'll tell the stories, and our history will be safe in your hands and hearts. The Reading Challenge, of course, and I'll come to that, but it's also a pleasure to be here to launch the Reading Challenge. The Reading Challenge is, again, the heart and soul of literature and knowledge, and here at the library is very much the heart and soul. It was Redmond Barry who established the public library in the first instance, and we can look to his legacy at every opportunity. In the 21st century, the library's principles are expressed more succinctly, but echo Sir Redmond's early beliefs. They are information, ideas, inspiration for everyone, and that's something that we can all connect to and stand by, because reading is about all of that and more. The library, I'm pleased to say, is a founding partner of the National Year of Reading and has long been involved in promoting literacy and reading to people of all ages and cultures in Victoria. I'm pleased to say that in response to increasing visitors' numbers, we supplied additional funds in last year's budget. Melburnians borrow more books from local libraries than the rest of Australia, and we have the most bookshops per head of population. And some of us note with some sadness some of those bookshops have had a bit of a hit of recent times. I did read in weekend papers that some are coming back, and let's hope that that's the case and there's more of it. Our most livable city is also the birthplace of so many influential writers such as Sophie Cunningham and David Williamson and Alice Pang and others. And we have a strong, creative and vibrant publishing industry. And John mentioned I am the Minister for the Arts, and it's not a trifle. I take it seriously, and what the arts do for our culture, what the arts do for our livability, and what the arts do to attract those who would invest and come to live here, we should never underestimate. We are the capital of literature within Australia and one of only 5 international cities of literature recognised by UNESCO, and I take the opportunity to pay tribute to my predecessors who put that in place, and I think it is a positive step. The government joins you in loving literature and reading, and you'd hate to see what's on my bedside table because it's a big stack and it keeps moving. What it means to Melburnians, from the youngest to the oldest, is that we appreciate stories and we're prepared to tell them. We've provided ongoing funds for the City of Literature initiative and taking the activity and events into the regions, and I think that's a good thing too. And we've also created the most generous literary awards in the country, including the single largest literary prize in Australia, the Victorian Prize for Literature. We're home to the Wheeler Centre, which is to be found next door here within the library complex. And again, I pay tribute to my predecessors who saw that into fruition. The centre is dedicated to the discussion and practice of writing and ideas, and it holds more than 1,000 events every year and engages more than 500 writers in its programs. That's a positive. The annual Melbourne Writers' Festival grows in size and stature every year, and as a result it's relocated to larger, more central CBD venues, and that's increased audience and program, and in the process joining an alliance with other festivals in Edinburgh, Beijing, Berlin and Toronto. And the State Library lawns, if you haven't noticed, are always covered with kids, and that's a part of the attraction it's building. The activities, the storytellers during Melbourne's Colourful Children's Book Festival are always fun, and they're always much appreciated. And if you've ever studied in the library or sought to use the resources of the library, you'll know how special this place can be. Shortly I've got the delight and the pleasure of meeting with a bunch of very enthusiastic young readers as we launch this year's Victorian Premier's Reading Challenge. And again, I take the handball from Steve, who started this, and I thought it was a fantastic idea. And it's held up, it's been embraced by kids, and it's encouraged kids. And I know my kids have been part of it. And there's a little story to it. I can tell that little backstory. Our boy was reading a couple of years ago, and he embraced the Readers' Challenge, and he said to me, he got a certificate from John, and he said, "Oh, Dad, do you reckon next year I could get a certificate from you?" And he was kind of ahead of the game a bit. It's said in all innocence, and I thought, well, this is not something that should be in any way partisan. So when we came to office and the staff came to us and said, well, Premier, you're going to renew the Premier's Challenge, and I said, oh, I want to change it. And there was downcast looks on a few faces, and they thought, oh no, a meddling Premier. And I sucked it out of them a little bit, and they were very depressed, and they finally said, well, what do you want to change, Premier? I said, I want to move the apostrophe. And the look of relief when they finally understood what I meant was palpable. And I've got to thank John and Jane and Steve and John and Jeff, who at relatively short notice, whatever it was, 12 months ago, agreed to stand with me in a photograph to jointly sponsor and support the Premier's Reading Challenge. And I hope that that sends a powerful message to kids in particular, that this is not a partisan effort, that everybody's on board here, that there's a history lesson here, there's a lesson in reading, and there's also a lesson in grammar, and that even an apostrophe can count. Of course you have the odd hiccup, and we'll have some improvements to it this year, but I again say thank you to my predecessors for joining it, and I know they were all pleased to be part of it. The challenge is now an annual event. It's targeted at school children from years prep to 10. And I know there'll be people in this room whose kids have embraced it, and I've met kids who've read 200 books, 250 books, chasing the challenge. And you've got to say that's extraordinary contribution. I see some of the books that kids read today, and it's remarkable. The challenge promotes the importance of reading among students in Victorian schools, as well as those who register as home-based readers, and it encourages families and parents to be more involved with supporting children's reading in and beyond school. And you've got to say that in time that's going to grow to be a very powerful position for Victoria with our young people. And I have to say that I've told the story to other premiers, and they're looking, I think there'll be some other states embracing similar moves. The challenge requires students to read a set number of books, but my observation is that many read many more than what is set. Last year, more than 220,000 students took up the challenge, with more than 124,000 successfully reaching their reading targets. And you've got to say that's a tribute to the kids, it's a tribute to the teachers who promoted it, it's a tribute to parents who've endured it, late nights, and it's better than a computer, I've got to say. and again I say it's a tribute to Steve, who had the idea in the first place. Last year we did reorient the challenge, and I do hope that we can continue with that. I know the premiers, the former premiers, have all agreed again this year. The National Year of Reading is about children learning to read and finding new sources of inspiration. It's about sending the message that I think we've got here in Victoria very strongly right across the nation. It's about that great tradition of storytelling, as I said, to an enthralled audience, because that's what young people are, and promoting a reading culture in every home. And it's about uncovering the amazing amount of resources in your local library. And we do forget that the local libraries are amazing resources, and we want Australians to discover and rediscover the love of a good book. The National Year of Reading has a number of campaigns and projects planned that I'm sure will get more people more curious about more books and more stories. The Reading Hour, which aims to promote at least 1 hour of reading per week. Campaigns targeted at improving the literacy of children, teenagers, adults and Indigenous Australians. The Writer in Residence programs, and of course Our Story, a project to select and promote 8 books representing a nation to form Australia's largest book club. In conclusion, the National Year of Reading and the Victorian Premier's Reading Challenge are great initiatives for helping children and adults rediscover the magic of books, fiction, non-fiction, books about exotic places, fascinating people, faraway trees and pirates and stories of Victoria in particular. And the more that people read the stories of Victoria, the stronger this state will be. Congratulations to all involved. Happy reading, enjoy the challenge, and I look forward to seeing the results in years to come. Thanks very much.